I felt like I was watching a screensaver.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, like that's a really good shot of Glacier National Park, and there is a Columbine like in the dawn light,
and utterly devoid of emotion. It is just the thing. There's this wacky little store right down the street from me called If It's Books, It's Not Hoarding.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah. And as I was driving past, they seem to have a really, maybe they're sort of the Christopher's Cakes kind of analog in my neighborhood, because I'm like, there is no way that place stays in business. Yeah. And yet, every time I drive by, there is a great vintage movie poster in a new one in the window. And the one that was up there that I saw the other day that instantly made me think of you was this great Outlaw Josie Wales poster with like Eastwood like screaming with like the 6-shooter held aloft. I know, just the face.
I know that exact poster because one of my college dorm mates had it, right? And he's got his mouth open, and then one of the gun. I think he's holding two guns, and one of them's up, and the other one's leveled. Yep. Does that sound right? Yeah,
it's true. I was glimpsing it through the window of a driving car, so I was able to ascertain those details. It's a great looking poster. As I was listening to the last time we talked about Christopher's Cakes in our Tampopo episode, there's this hilarious moment where we're talking about the derivation of the name Christopher. And I was saying it's bearer of Christ, and this is a very understandable error to make, and I didn't even pick up on the time. But you said, oh, then does Toffer mean bearer? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it does. Forgetting that
Christ
we're
has
talking
a T.
about Christ. And so bearer is probably something more like offer.
Yeah. Yes. We neglected the T in that.
Yeah. I mean, like I see myself in the Son of God all the time. So I'm not surprised that you did too.
Well, we all have Buddha nature too. It does bring up a memory of one time many, many years ago when you and I were climbing with our friends Justin and Elsa. And I think that like you met us there at the rock face, and I remember Elsa spotted you and shouted out, "There's a topher!" Which was very charming.
That sounds accurate. Yeah. That sounds like Elsa. Yeah. It also sounds like me sort of showing up not at the beginning.
Yeah, well, you had other business to attend to.
Sure. Yeah. That seems to be the story of my life. I have other business.
There is also one of, the trip that hooked me on rock climbing, I believe, was 2001 or 2002 at Otter Cliffs. Mm-hmm. And one of my memories was climbing until the absolute dusk at like 8:30 in the evening, because we'd always get there after the guide service, and then you pulling up slightly earlier than everybody, and by the time the rest of us pulled up, you had lentils and beans prepared on a like whisper light in the like parking lot, and we ate it on the tailgate. And I was like, yeah, this is the life. This is as good as it gets right here. Shall we recap the evening's menu?
Yeah, let's get into it. We're talking about Sandra Nettlebeck's 2001 film, Mostly Martha. Did you know in your research? Did you discover the American version of this?
I vaguely recall, no reservations or something like that. Yeah, which looks terrible.
Catherine Zeta-Jones and Aaron Eckhart in the lead roles. Like, what could have gone wrong?
Both of whom are capable of great acting. But there was just something about the look of it. I watched a preview, and it looked to me like it was a shot-for-shot remake, which I'm not a big fan of shot-for-shot remakes.
No, I mean, you get, even at I think in your best possible outcome is a dutiful represention with no heart.
Yeah, and also in the preview, I didn't really see much of the kid either, which is kind of, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I think that Martha's relationship with Lina is the heart of this narrative, even though
Totally.
there are other important things that happen. And well, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. We open with Martha. This is a German movie, talking to her therapist about food. We discover pretty quickly the therapist is a little frustrated with Martha because she is there under compulsion, because she's going to be fired from her job at a fancy restaurant in Hamburg called Lido. She is a tempestuous but somewhat repressed chef who struggles to take both compliments from her customers and criticism. Criticism in particular, she has a history of going out into the dining room and berating customers who have complaints, which is understandable from an artist's point of view and less understandable from a business person's point of view. We see this for a little bit, and we quickly move on to the chief information about the plot, which is that Martha's sister, who we have not seen yet, is killed in a car accident, leaving Martha as the caretaker of her sister's daughter named Lina. Martha promises to find Lina's father, an Italian named Giuseppe, and that's all we know about him. We really don't know very much about him at all. Martha's kind of erratic. I mean, she's clearly going through a lot of stuff, and her restaurant hires another charismatic chef named Mario to fill an upcoming absence, but also you get the sense to maybe sort of hedge the restaurant's bets in case they need to fire Martha so that Mario could perhaps take over. And he kind of shows up and begins kind of taking over anyway. He's charismatic, he's fun, he likes to listen to music. He is the Dionysus that opposes Martha's, I don't know, Hera?
It's not exactly. It's definitely not Apollonian. Yeah, maybe more very German uptightness, right? Sense of control. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's a conflict. There's a little bit of a. They kind of have it out in the kitchen, Martha and Mario says, "Look, I can work wherever I want. I'm not here to steal your job. I love your cooking, and I want to learn from it, and I want to be a part of it. But if you want me to go, I'll go. Do you want me to go?" And he does this very sort of like Latin kind of performative, like, I need you to tell me that you want me to stay. And so she's like, fine, we'll stay. And then, in this part of the film, they're kind of a series of scenes, skits of Martha slowly but surely getting kind of better at caring for Lina. And actually, Mario helps with this. In one of my absolute favorite moments in the movie, Lina has not been eating for several days. And, Martha at nights usually works at night. She's tried a babysitter. She's tried just like leaving her there home alone. And so finally, she sort of in desperation brings her into the kitchen, and most of them are happy to have her there. The other cooks, we're not so sure if the owner thinks it's good for her to be there. But Mario really takes to her and does this sort of little lovely thing where he tricks her into eating some pasta by, eating it himself and then handing it off to her and being sort of saying like, leave some for me. And then she's obviously starving and there's this plate of delicious pasta. And then I also think it helps that Mario is Italian and Lina knows that her father is Italian. So she's interested in the Italian culture. So they all start getting along a little bit better. There's this interesting kind of subplot with a neighbor that is kind of perplexing, but the neighbor helps a little bit and seems like a good dude. Finally, after Martha's, though, kind of at her wit's end. She's trying to track down the father. It's really impossible to work the job she's working and care for Lina. And so Lina's missing school. Bad things are happening. And so finally, at one point, she gets distracted. One of her employees goes into labor. She takes the employee to the hospital and completely forgets to pick Lina up from school. She feels really, really bad about it. And as an apology, she basically says, I'll do anything you want. And Lina's request is to have Mario come over for dinner and cook. And it's a fun night. Martha is locked out of the kitchen, which is really, really hard for her. And then later, after the meal is done, the kitchen is in total tatters, which is also hard for her. And she starts to hyperventilate. But they all have a really good time. They pick up sticks, and you can tell there's kind of a romantic attraction developing now between Martha and Mario. Then there's some I forget exactly what happens, but there's a series of events that leads Lina trying to run away to Italy. I think they do find the father and send a letter, but I think I can't remember exactly what it was, but Martha makes some kind of parenting mistake. Lina's angry. They kind of shout at each other. Lina tries to run away. Martha collects her from the police station, and then there's just this remarkable scene where Martha kind of is clearly overcome with worry and love and regret at not being a good surrogate mother, and they have a kind of hugging moment where they bond, and things seem like they're on a pretty good footing. And I'll kick it back to you.
And right at that moment, Giuseppe, who appears to be a truck driver who owns a large Italian villa, appears. And,
it's a socialist country, you know. Maybe he owns the trucking business. I don't.
Maybe. You know.
Also, a lot of those villas.
It's a melodrama. Who cares?
I feel like you can get a lot of those villas for a song too. A lot of them are a bit run down, you know.
But he arrives. He seems to be a really good guy.
Yeah.
He tells Martha, "Look, if I'd known, like, I didn't know about Lina. If I'd known, we would be meeting under different circumstances." Martha is worried, but Giuseppe seems to put her fears at ease for the moment, and Lina departs with him for Italy. This kind of precipitates Martha pushing Mario away, asking him to leave. She's pretty overcome. She returns to the restaurant. There is a wonderful, one of my favorite moments. We get sort of a pan in on Martha, who is clearly depressed, alone at the restaurant. And then the camera begins to pull back as the kitchen fills with the other people that she works with. And she kind of has a let's get back to business moment, even though I'm basically heartbroken and depressed. But she is sort of saved by another cantankerous customer who wants a very rare steak. And this ends up with Martha storming out into the dining room with a raw steak and forking it to the table where the customer is seated. She quits and or is fired and asks Mario for help, and they drive to Italy to see if they can reclaim Lina. Apparently, Giuseppe and his wife and their family are okay with that.
Weird.
Lina returns with Martha and Mario, and in this quick little epilogue, we see Martha and Mario getting married, and they have a party, and they have a party at Giuseppe's Italian villa, maybe.
Well, and
he's there.
And I think we're meant to understand that they have chosen to live in Italy near to Giuseppe, which is maybe why Giuseppe and his wife are okay with whatever. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're doing joint custody or something. I found it a little bit poorly explained. But yes, they get married. Just, there's no conflict. Everybody is happy. Cue the Keith Jarrett.
Yeah, so much Keith Jarrett.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Yeah.
It's really good, but it's. And then that's the end of the movie.
Yep, there we go. All wrapped up. The ever after, sort of dispensed with. What's Martha going to do with her workaholism? What's she going to do with her depression? Who cares?
We also get the sense that they're going to open a restaurant, right? Because at one point we see Martha and Mario and Lina kind of going through an old dusty Italian sort of whatever the Italian equivalent of a public house is, and sort of being oh, we could restore this, no problem. And Lina being I don't know if it's going to be as easy as and we have the sense that, they're going to open a restaurant. It's Europe, you can just you could just collect social services for 2 years while you're figuring that out, it'll work out.
Yeah, no problem.
Free healthcare.
Here's your Italian villa and your restaurant seed fund.
Yeah. And then once you've got it going, I'm sure there'll be plenty of customers who want to come to this out of the way backwater in Italy. I may have had a few problems with the ending. You might be sensing.
Me too.
You alluded to a few episodes ago the 7 stories, and also how Rob Harvilla says there's actually 8, and one of them is Con Air. Which of the 7 stories is this?
Sadly, it's not Con Air. That would be
Definitely not.
bummer, because that would be great. Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure one of the stories in there is boy meets girl or girl meets boy. I would say that this is girl meets boy. And because that's the real important part of the story. It's about the getting together of Martha and Mario and maybe beginning the healing of Martha's repression. And that's generally the nature of boy meets girl, girl meets boy, because there has to be some conflict. The conflict is usually there's something wrong with one or both of the characters that doesn't allow them to be together. And then the change or the epiphany or the twist is one of the characters realizing in a flash of insight that, they need to change so that they can be together with this other person. And they go off to do that. Will Hunting jumps in his car and drives across the country to go see Minnie Driver, blah, blah, blah. I would say that I would park this one firmly in girl meets boy territory. And the food and the emotional subplot with Lina are not quite cheap tricks intended to amp up the emotional impact of the movie. But for me, they are in the ballpark of a cheap trick.
Huh. Well, interesting. I think I see why you would say all that. I think that I think there's one thing I completely disagree about, which for me, at least the way I emotionally relate to this film, the Martha-Lina plot to me is the plot, and the Mario is the subplot, and Mario is sort of the helper, because I think it's a story about Martha, essentially somebody who is reluctantly made to be the caregiver for a child, who then awkwardly assumes that mantle, but over time develops a deep bond and finds a greater purpose in fulfilling that role as caregiver. And the reason I asked about the 7 stories is there's a lot of movies where that happens, but I wonder if this is like a 20th, 21st century 8th story, the sort of, because I was just thinking, it's without doing any research, just thinking, I came up with About a Boy, Kramer versus Kramer, The Karate Kid, Leon the Professional, News of the World, Waterworld, Big Daddy, Maleficent, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Also the books A Solitary Blue and The Great Gilly Hopkins and the whole Punky Brewster series. And these are powerful stories, and there's something that always tugs at my heartstrings when I see a kind of awkward, often either broken or stunted character who then has to take care of a child. Those instincts kick in because any fundamentally decent person is going to try to do a good job taking care of a child. There's awkwardness, there's uncomfortability, but then something forms that cannot replace the child's relationship to the lost parent, but perhaps maybe can live alongside it. It doesn't replace it, but becomes something new that is also valued. And I think that is a good story, and to me, Mario doesn't change throughout. So Martha and Mario getting together, it's great. I'm happy for them. And to me, though, he is also kind of a helper on that quest, because he kind of, when Martha's really struggling, he gives a helpful little nudge, kind of Han Solo like, sort of knocks Darth Vader aside at the last minute so Luke can do what he needs to do. He's not the main hero here, but he helps when needed. But I just don't know if that's an ancient story or if this is something maybe relatively new, in the age. I mean, there've always been widows, right? There have always been step parents, but maybe kind of in the age of the no-fault divorce. Maybe that's why there's been this modern proliferation of these kinds of stories, kind of starting with Kramer versus Kramer. And Kramer versus Kramer is all over this film in many respects. I mean, first, I'll talk more about it later. But But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know that we always have to agree, but that was just one of the things that made me think about is like, I feel like this is a modern story type, that it's not as big as comedy or tragedy.
Yeah.
But like if you take it down a level of sort of specificity, I mean, maybe one of the 7 stories is taking on the mantle, sort of Prince Hal, Henry IV, Well,
it's, the one that I think fits what you're describing is Rebirth. So the seven stories that we've got from the Rob Harvilla podcast and then from the book that he's referencing are Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, Voyage and Return, Comedy, Tragedy, Rebirth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Rebirth is the closest of all of those.
Yeah. An event forces the main character to change their ways and often become a better individual.
There you go.
Which I think you are right. I think in this grouping, my boy meets girl, girl meets boy ends up in comedy because that's the nature of comedy is creation of relationships that then keep going.
Right.
I think you're right. I think you're probably closer. I think my issue with this movie does mostly circle around the ending because, like, my God, you would really think if you only watched the last 10 to 15 minutes of this movie that it was only a romantic comedy.
Yeah, no, it's like suddenly Nora Ephron took over. Although that's a little bit unfair to Nora Ephron because she's so great. But it's like all the people who are trying to be Nora Ephron took over at the end. That tracking in shot when Martha is all alone in the kitchen after Giuseppe has taken her away and you can tell she's so sad. And I mean, I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but in my opinion, this movie has one great virtue, and that is Martina Gedeck's performance, which elevates it from like maybe a okay movie to like a pretty good movie. To me, it elevates it, I'll just give it away. I think it's only an okay script. I see flaws in the script. I think the filmmaking is good, but not extraordinary in terms of the cinematography and all of those other things. I think the script needed another draft. I think there were weird plot threads that don't make sense that somebody should have been like, did we really need this, Sandra? But you have this absolutely profound, transcendent, like, it's like Meryl Streep in the early 80s level of like acting from Martina that elevates what would probably otherwise be a kind of like mediocre to okay film into actually a pretty good movie because it's really worth watching just for that. And also the actress who plays Lina and the two of them together is also stunningly good. And it's hard to do that kind of child acting and that emotional child acting, to be mourning and depressed. And then also the bond that those two characters establish feels very, very real. And the guy who plays Mario is fine. He does what he's supposed to do, but that character's great, but he's not interesting because he never changes. He's just basically like Italianness embodied. Right?
He's fun.
Yeah.
Mario is fun. Mario is
and he's a good dude, right? Like and he's instinctively good at the kind of bonding that Lina needs in a way that Martha really struggles with, and so he's great. But yes, I think there was a little bit of an aside that I was also thinking, though, in that moment you were describing, that sort of real, and this is again one of the greatest moments in the film. Giuseppe has taken Lina away. Marta is sad, she's depressed, but she's going to get back to work, and like the kitchen fills up, and I was like, it would be so gutsy to end the film right here. That would be...
I wondered if it was going to end right there, and it didn't.
It would be it's the kind of thing that Hollywood, like the screenwriter would end it there, and then Hollywood says, no, you gotta cut. It kind of did feel that way. I mean, I also feel like there was another path to a happy ending the film could have taken, but it just got there too quickly and easily. They could have gone to Italy and had a like argument, or something. That I didn't buy that ending. I was just like, it wouldn't be that easy. And everything up to this point has been pretty naturalistic and realistic to me, except that. So that was frustrating.
The way of it, and we've kind of touched on my question about enoughness.
Yeah.
that was I was kind of wanted to go in this direction.
Sure.
But I 100% agree with what you're talking about what is the actor's last name?
Martina Gedeck.
Martina Gedeck. Yeah. I feel like this movie is, most of it is a paint by numbers backdrop.
Yeah.
With like Martina Gedeck and the actor who plays Lina, like, are kind of like, it's like if you took like a Caravaggio or a Vermeer, like two characters from that, removed the background, and then pasted them on top of like a Bob Ross paint by numbers like backdrop. Yeah.
And I mean, Sandra Nettlebeck, like, she's the director. She, as far as I can tell, she's sort of like Germany's Cameron Crowe. A kind of...
Does a lot of writing, does a lot of filmmaking.
Yeah, and also, I mean, not in the sense that she was a music journalist, but also sort of like her films kind of document her generation, in a same way that maybe Fast Times and Singles did, where often there's sort of sociological observation. Her first film that did well feels a lot like Singles, or it's one of those films where there's a bunch of friends and they all know each other and they hang out, but they all have their own journeys, which were very popular in the 90s. And so, I mean, you don't get that kind of performance if you're not a good director. And she knew enough to get out of the way of her actors and to build the frame. So, I mean, clearly she's doing a lot right. And I have some problems with the script and the screenplay, but at the same time, it's better than any screenplay I could write. I mean, it's a pretty, it has a structure that makes sense. But it is, well, I don't know your question about enoughness, but it also, to me, it's like the story is more complicated than it needs to be, but then also simplifies the ending in a way that doesn't make sense. And those things feel a little bit out of balance to me.
Yeah, it feels threadbare to me. I don't buy the transitions. I have no idea how they locate Giuseppe.
Yeah, they never explain it.
Yeah, there's something about the letter that Martha asks Mario to help translate, and he has some sort of very outsized reaction because I think he says like, "My God," something in Italian. Like
I think he just didn't understand the situation that Martha was dealing with fully. I think that's him realizing, oh, I see what's going on. You're taking care of this girl, and your sister died, and you're taking care of your niece, and I think that's just him catching up to where we all already are. That was all right. That's my best.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because otherwise, the letter would be pretty straightforward. I don't think there's. I don't know. I don't know what else it would be other than that.
I don't know how we even, I mean, like, we just know Giuseppe's first name.
Yeah, you would, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you just need a scene where Martha goes and pulls the birth certificate from the hospital. You just need to see her being like, okay, danke, and opening the birth. It's like a 30-second scene that needs to get slipped in there that's missing. Because it's not, they would have been able to find, his name. They have birth certificates. It would have been possible. But and then there's other scenes in there that sort of they seem like they're going to go somewhere, but they don't actually end up being particularly meaningful. I see you have a note about the neighbor, and it's this like stranded subplot that it seems like maybe it's, and I don't know, maybe Sandra Nettlebeck is sort of like, well, that's life. You have these weird sort of relationships that don't go anywhere sometimes, or you think it's going to be a romantic, but what you really did was find the perfect babysitter, and, which is kind of like what happens.
I know. Yeah. It's like there are two drafts of this movie operating at the same point, where like the downstairs neighbor Sam is perhaps the romantic interest. Yeah. But then, like, at some point, Sandra Nettlebeck's like, "No, I've got it. There'll be this like rambunctious sous chef who comes in, and then she forgot to excise the downside the neighbor."
It does totally feel like that. Well, so another question along these lines is: was there any moment where this film surprised you?
No, it was one of those movies where I found myself thinking, oh, I think I know what's going to happen next. And then being so disappointed when I was proved correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the greatest moment, it follows a formula, and it rarely does it in a way that is astonishing. Even, the very opening scene, you're in the restaurant, and maybe it's because we've already seen like 3 movies like this that you and I are starting to get jaded. But I was like, okay, you get somebody chopping celery, you get a panning shot of the gas burners, and it's like somehow all the other movies we've seen, well, not all, but all the other movies we've seen about food have either made you hungry or kind of grossed out. Like with the cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover. The shots of the kitchen are stunning. They're just not appetizing. Yeah. But the other 3, the shots of the cooking are stunning, and they make you hungry, and they're inspiring. And this just felt like, I was like, I don't think I want to go to this restaurant. Like everything's kind of like modern and a lot of white. And is it French cuisine or German cuisine? It's sort of French. It's sort of a hybrid. I'm sure we're meant to think that the food is really good, and that Martha is really, really good at what she does. But it was almost like you told a film student, like, okay, be sure you get okay, you're going to go in there. We're going to have to get a 1 shot of Martha, and then we're going to have to get coverage shot of everybody. And I want you to get some details. I don't know. And this person's just like taking notes, like studiously. And you're like, get a tracking shot of the gas burners, get somebody chopping celery, get somebody like lighting the creme brulee on fire, I don't know, get a shot of, let's get a nice little like tracking shot going through the dining room, have the camera up high so we kind of see the sweep of it, have somebody taking their coat off, and that person just writes that down and dutifully gets all those things with like no particular creativity, nothing surprising, and nothing that nothing that seems to really be interested in using the space creatively. It's just like, that's how you make a film about a kitchen.
I felt like I was watching a screensaver.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, like that's a really good shot of Glacier National Park, and there's a Columbine like in the dawn light,
utterly devoid of emotion.
Right.
It is just the thing, and that's that was my question in the rundown about like what does the food do. There's this thing that happens. I've been guilty of it too, especially when I was learning how to write in college and after college, called epic amplification, where you are like, well, this story I'm coming up with or poem or whatever, it's fine, but if I said it somehow in like Troy, I mean, for me, it was like realizing that all the towns in upstate New York have like Greek names. And I was like, oh my God, wow. I can retell the Odyssey in upstate New York. And then I was like, well, that's a dumb idea. That's been done before.
Probably been done, right? Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I mean,
I think I once wrote a poem called On the Road to Damascus, Virginia, along those same lines, or struck blind on the road to Damascus, Virginia.
Because some people, this is the thing with derivative work, is that some people get it just right. I mean, like W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming, and W.H. Auden, the Shield of Achilles, most of Rilke. Like, you can use the epic and you can use the big stories from the past, but you have to add something new.
Yeah.
You have to say something fresh using those big stories. You can't just borrow the bigness. And this movie coming out in 2001, sort of at the beginning of like the Food Network revolution. This is like right in that moment when Kitchen Confidential comes out.
Right. When was Big Night?
That's Big Night, I think, is 96 or 97.
Yeah,
it's a few years earlier than this. But we're in this sort of heyday of like America and the world really sort of like getting obsessed with food. And I feel like this is an opportunistic, well-made movie that uses food to amplify what is essentially like just sort of an okay character study bolted onto a rom-com.
Yeah. I mean, when you say okay character study bolted to a rom-com, I agree that's what the script is. I do think we get this magnificent performance from two of the actors that actually elevates it into good. Like, I think this is good. I don't think it's great. And I think we've been spoiled because in this series, I feel like we've seen 3 great films. You know, like we just watched Tampopo and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. And so like hard acts to follow.
Seriously.
But I think that's right. And I think that that's a good observation. You know, you do have these moments of Martha getting angry at the customers for their, you know, but it's like, I liked that movie the first time when it was called Big Night, you know, to do David Spade's Hollywood moment or Hollywood minute. That's been done. Even, you know, I thought at one point there was some reference to like quails and truffles. And I was like, is that just like a little reference to Babette's Feast too? Like, is that just like which would be fine with me. I don't mind a little like, you know, a little appreciative tip of the hat. But, you know, I think Sandra Nettlebeck doesn't quite know what the food is doing. I think she knows one thing, maybe 2 things that are good. But then that's not enough if you're going to go big with food. I think what she knows, there's definitely an idea about Martha's relationship to food to being one of control and also being a kind of escape where she can remain emotionally stunted. And that's why we get the first scene with the therapist where all she does is talk about food. And then she says, yeah, I have no idea why I'm going here. I'm completely sane. But clearly she's emotionally distant from herself in some interesting way. And then it's also about control. And I think this part is actually very, very nice. You know, the contrast between her cooking style and Mario's style. When her sister dies, her kitchen is very orderly. Both her home kitchen, but also her professional kitchen are very orderly. She's not a mean cook, I don't think. She doesn't order people around. People know their jobs, but it's very orderly. Place for everything. Everything is in its place. And when she comes home after learning that her sister dies, what is the first thing she does? She starts straightening up her jars of pasta. And then what's the first thing she does when she takes Lina home? And actually the first thing she says is like, she has a good impulse, which is, I need to do something for this child. This child needs me. I need to show her love. And the only thing she could think to do that with is to cook a lovely meal, perfectly lovely. It looks like lamb and some lovely potatoes, but Lina's not hungry because she's sad and depressed. And Martha, that's it. Like Martha's like, that's all I know. That's my only trick.
Yep.
You know, what do I do now? And so I do think that is a nice gesture on the part of the screenwriter, but I also don't think it's enough. And I think like we're going to watch Big Night, but you totally get this with Tampopo. You totally get it. We don't understand why Martha has that relationship to the food. Like you understand why Goro and Gun and Tampopo are on the quest for ramen. Yeah. You understand why Chu in that movie shows his love through food. You can see his just joy when he's in the kitchen cooking by himself and his sense of command. And also there's just something about the way all that stuff is filmed that's just stunning as opposed to screensavery. There's just a higher level of artistic craft in the visuals there. It's more creative. It's sort of It's like the director relates to the character's relation. And Babette's Feast also has that. Like you can taste those quails in the sarcophagi. You know, you wanna sample the port. And it just doesn't, I don't think that the depictions of Martha in the kitchen, she talks about food. We get that she's good at it. We see her being good at it, but I don't think we understand why she's good at it. And I don't think we understand her relationship to it. And even when they flirt, it's kind of like, it's not even like, Mario's kind of feeding her different sauces and she's telling what the ingredients are, which is, it's a nice idea, but it's like, it's not that. I think I could have thought of that. It's like, it's not,
totally.
it's sort of, screenwriting 101. Like, what's a way they could flirt with food? I don't know. Maybe he could put different foods on a spoon and she could show off her tasting ability. So
I mean, all the other food films we've watched so far, the directors have a really clear idea about the world that they want to make.
Yeah.
And even though, like, we talked about The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and His Lover, that it is, like, explicitly, like, theater flats.
Right.
And, like, explicitly fake. And yet the world feels wholly realized in a really terrifying and very concrete way. This looks realistic and concrete and feels like theater flats.
Yeah,
that's sort of the that's it. That I'm sort of rephrasing what you're going with. And again, like the acting is very, 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 very good. And that's the savior of this film. It is, but it's like listening to a good studio musician.
Interesting. I mean, I think it's like, okay, well, so this is one moment that's very interesting, and it's like, if I'm going to be defensive of Sandra Nettlebeck for a second.
Nettlebeck.
Those Germans and their names. Okay, so there is this moment where Martha picks up Lina from the police station after she's run away. And Lina feels bad, and she's in trouble, and they had a fight the night before. They quarreled, and Martha's driving in the car. They're not speaking, and Martha just pulls over, gets out, stands there for a moment, takes several deep breaths, comes back into the car, goes into the back seat, and then she doesn't scold. It's a little bit of a scold, but her emotional response is more, I was so worried about you, as opposed to, you've been very bad. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, they both kind of melt.
Yeah.
I think that's the heart of the movie. Mm-hmm. If you think about how you write that in the screenplay, there's nothing you can really give the actors.
Yeah.
You just have, I don't, you have to hope that the context up to that moment has been described well enough that the actors then have enough to do the work of understanding how to play that scene. And I don't know, I've never directed actors, but it's not in the words. It's all in the body language. It's almost silent. And to my mind, they play it perfectly. And that was the moment where I felt the most emotionally invested in the film. That's when the moment I felt the most in awe. And again, like, Sandra Nettlebeck bad directors don't get those moments,
Totally.
So she's doing something right,
Yeah, I don't think she's a bad. I mean, Eric Clapton was a studio musician,
right.
So many of the musicians that we know and love from the 70s and 80s and 90s had like great careers as studio musicians, and they did their work. They hit their mark. They hit the chords. They played the solo. Probably for some commercial jingles. And yeah, I think that Nettlebeck is probably a perfectly competent, good director, certainly better than anything I could achieve and in directing and or writing and getting performances out of. It's in the context of the other stuff we're considering and the fact that we've got Big Night coming up. I don't dislike this movie, but I don't need to see it again.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe that's the lesson here, is that I think her ideas are a little bit confused. And I think her strongest idea, that the thing that she knows and that she's able to communicate to her actors to get the performance, is that Martha is kind of stunted and kind of broken, and she's not doing a very good job, being this surrogate or fill-in mother. But they do fall in, motherly, daughterly love with one another. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that we need to be convinced of. And even though the script is kind of flawed, it works just because they play it. Mm-hmm. They play it well. And so it's like, it's got a good idea at the heart of it. And then, some of these other aspects are just, there's a little too much music. I mean, when we're talking about, like, there's different ways you could animate the food part. Like, you could make it, you could bring us more into the preparation of the meal. Like, we never see any one dish get prepared. We're seeing this kind of like, we're seeing a busy kitchen and we see the outcomes, and we're seeing like somebody's working on this. So you could be brought into that in some way, or you could be brought into the community of the kitchen. They seem like interesting people, like, the cooks and the servers, they have family meal together. They're all like beautiful, Yeah. And you get a little bit of it, like the pregnant, line cook. And like, you get a sense that there is a community, and like, you could maybe, if you had just like 2 more scenes in that kitchen where somebody other than Mario somehow helped Martha, or it could be about that, right? Like it could be about the community of the kitchen, but it doesn't quite do it. It alludes, and it doesn't quite get there.
There's this moment towards the end where Mario says to Martha, like, Lina loves you, Martha. And I was like, really? I agree with you that the movie is missing something.
Yeah.
And like, yes, there's that scene in the car, but we don't see some of Lina's reservations be unpacked and then answered.
Yeah.
And in the same way that one of my big issues with it is like, is this happily ever after? Like, I don't really know how much Martha has actually changed.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I do think that Lina loves Martha, but I think she always did. Like, we see that flashback sequence where, when Martha was just the aunt and they're sort of like playing together at the beach. And so it's like they always had a bond, and maybe it's grown a little bit. But there's, the movie where they fall asleep, the part where the scene where they fall asleep and then they're sort of like cuddling together. And then there's a moment where Lina, when Martha's hugging her in the car and Lina just reaches out and strokes her chin. And I was like, good God, like it felt so well. I just imagining like a 10-year-old girl with kind of like who could play that scene effectively. And I bought it, that there was this sort of bond between them and in that moment. But I looked up the child actor, and she hasn't done all that much, but I thought that was actually, that's hard to play what she's being asked to play. She's very quiet. She's internal. She's depressed. She's sad, but then she's melting, she's warming to Martha. All of those things are hard to play. There's that one moment where they're in the kitchen and she's sort of catatonic and she just kind of like bulldozes her way between Martha and the other cook who are laying things out, which
I love that.
It was great. Yeah.
I wanted more of that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like she could have animated the movie in a way that she didn't. I'm trying to think of other movies where this really works. At this point, The Professional really hasn't aged well, but Natalie Portman makes that movie work.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of movies where the kid does most of the work in terms of being the emotional center.
Kramer versus Kramer is a good example. When the kid feels distinct and like they have a personality, and part of what happens is the reluctant caregiver starts recognizing that and starts valuing it, and then often gets to the point of valuing it sort of fiercely, that can be really powerful. And it's very common that happens and then they get taken away too. I think that happened in Punky Brewster, if I recall. There was a moment where Punky was like going to be adopted, away from Henry, her foster dad. But I think like at the last minute she's like, no, I want to stay with Henry or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Like those new people are going to make me give up on my side ponytail.
Yeah, even though there was something attractive about them too, like maybe they had a lot of money or something. I don't remember. We're going to go to Europe. We're
going to move to Bel Air.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, shall we go to trivia?
Yeah, let's go to trivia. I don't know if we have a host anymore. Did I go first last time?
I think you did last time, so I think I can go first this time.
Great.
Okay, so I watched I listened to an interview with Martina Gedeck.
Oh, cool.
She,
that must have been awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I've seen her in other movies. She was in The Good Shepherd, and I remember her in that. She was in this movie called The Lives of Others, which was about East German surveillance.
Holy crap, is she the love interest in The Lives of Others? Yeah. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
She's a little older, and you can tell that she's kind of starting to age a little bit. She's 40 in this film, but you wouldn't necessarily know that. I
thought she looked familiar. Oh my God.
Yeah. This was kind of her international breakout. She had been pretty well known in Germany, but she also had, she didn't act in movies until she was in her late 20s. She'd done theater. And then, got into a few films, and then this one won a bunch of European awards, and then she started getting international attention. But it's interesting. She had a similar career arc to Catherine Keener, in that like
Oh, right
most
on,
of
yeah.
us sort of discovered her at 40, you know,
Yeah.
and then
And then everyone was like, she's great.
yeah. Yeah, and then continued to be great, you know, and she's, you know, so she was talking about acting on the show, and this interview was done somewhere in the range of like 8 to 12 years ago, about 10 years ago, we'll say, but it could be give or take 3 years on either side of that.
Okay.
So she was speaking in an interview, and the interviewer asked her whether she recommended acting as a career to young people, and she basically said, you know, it's really hard. You know, you're gonna, it's hard work, and you're gonna need years of like 4 years of like hard training. Like she talked about her experience going to the school in Berlin, and then she said, but you know, unless you're a natural talent like blank, and then she named at the time very young American actress. So again, this was, I'm gonna say sometime between 2010 and 2020. So was the American actress who she named as a natural talent A, Emma Stone, B, Jennifer Lawrence, or C, Greta Gerwig?
Ooh. I think Greta Gerwig would be too... Wouldn't... I think the time framing is off for Greta Gerwig. This is going to be one of those classic ones where I talk myself out of the correct answer. But that seems... Because Greta Gerwig is like a full-grown woman at this point. So... All right, I'm going to keep going with my gut. I'm not going to play the odds. I'm going to eliminate C. So we've got Emma Stone and Jennifer Lawrence on the other two choices. Jennifer Lawrence.
You got it.
Yeah!
And it surprised me when I heard it, but now that I think about it, it totally makes sense because Martina Gedeck really transforms herself for every role. And I think one of the strengths of this performance is she's not just a woman emotionally stunted, you know, becoming more responsible. She's Martha. Like Martha has a very distinct personality. And I often will see Jennifer Lawrence in a movie and not realize it's her. And, you know, I tend to think of Emma Stone as like the more like critically acclaimed, brilliant actress of that generation. But I could totally see it. And of course, Martina Gedeck is often compared with sort of Meryl Streep and the young Meryl Streep. And I totally see that. Particularly the internality in particular and the vulnerability and the distinctiveness of the characters too.
Yeah, she manages to do that thing where you can see the internality without her putting the internality on. Yeah. Which is just very difficult. Takes a lot of faith.
She has this quote. I mean, she says that she spends a lot of time preparing. She learns the lines until they're dead cold. She's no longer thinking or remembering. She spends a lot of time preparing for the character, thinking about the emotional life of the character, and then when the camera's on, she's not thinking about what she's doing at all, and she just trusts that it'll come.
That's amazing. I you know,
and you can see that.
God.
I think you can see that. That level, like when she answers the phone, when she hangs up the phone, when she's gotten the call from her that her sister, her hand is shaking, you know, and it's like, I don't think it would work if you thought to yourself, I mean, maybe if you're only doing the shot of your hand, you could just shake your hand, you know, but like, I think for that kind of total body performance, she just has to be feeling what Martha is feeling right now. Then for that to work.
It's really akin to those like stories of Meryl Streep, like immersing herself in like, you know, tubs of ice water, you know, ahead of shots to like really get the like inner chill correct and things like that. Yeah. Oh yeah. Meryl Streep is horrible to herself.
I didn't know that, but I mean, and it also, you know, it also reminds me of kind of that whole generation, you know, to emerge from the sort of, you know, method school, like that, you know, all the people who were taking lessons from Sandy Meisner and the other, you know, that pack, you know, like De Niro, Pacino.
We're seeing it come back around in that like people really understand that the state of your body will be the state of your everything.
Yeah.
American culture veers back and forth between like thinking versus feeling, and it does not have to be a dichotomy.
Right.
And it shouldn't be a dichotomy.
Yeah.
But that's the way that we do things. So Sandra Nettlebeck cast herself in Mostly Martha as which secondary character? Was it A, Leah, the pregnant line cook? Was it B, Christian, Lina's mother, glimpsed in that home video? Or C, Frida, the owner of the restaurant Lido?
I think just from an age thing, I'm going to guess Frida, the owner of the restaurant.
It is B, Christian, Lina's mother, glimpsed in the home video.
Interesting. Yeah. So is that actually her? Or
that is actually Sandra Nettlebeck.
Oh, it's interesting because I know that was not. I know what she looks like. I boned that because I thought I thought that you were implying that she cast herself and then took herself out.
No. She was in. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's
she
all right. No,
cast
you said it
herself
correctly. I just
appeared
misunderstood
in
it.
it.
Yeah, I believe the person who plays the pregnant line cook reprises that role in No Reservations too.
No.
Or appears in it. Maybe she's in a different role because she's a little bit older. Maybe she's like the restaurant owner at that point.
Like fully like bringing full circle my paint by numbers claim to this movie to fruition.
Yeah.
We just get the same actors.
Same one. Yeah.
Heck, let's use the same kitchen set.
Yeah.
That home video was actually one of my favorite moments of the movie because it felt so real. Like it just felt honest.
What did you think about the moment where we're hearing the voiceover of her talking about how you kill lobsters?
I hadn't thought about it since you brought it back up. And I think that's the only moment of voiceover.
I think so too.
In the film.
Yeah.
So what the fuck is it doing there?
I don't know. I mean, one explanation, I thought maybe that was supposed to be therapy. And we were just hearing, because how many therapy scenes are there? Like 4 throughout the film?
All confusing.
I think the therapy maybe is supposed to be funny. And like maybe we're just not German, so we don't get, I think they're being kind of snarky with one another. And the snark doesn't quite maybe come across that they have a kind of contentious banter, maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely the first therapy scene I thought was useful because it established Martha's emotional stuntedness. The fact that all she does is sit in the therapist's office and talk about food. It's a good opening, right? Like, and you get the idea of what the problem is. And even the moment where he asks her, well, why are you here? And she says, I have no idea. And you're like, okay, that tells me something about you. I thought that was nice. But then later it doesn't really go anywhere. It seems like a weird framing device. But I did actually think like if that was meant to be the therapy, that was good because it fits the pattern. All she can talk about in therapy is food, but in this case, she's talking about like killing lobsters and death and how lobsters eat themselves from the inside, which is an analog for her emotional state
Totally.
Right then. So I was kind of like, oh, that would be cool if every time you're in therapy, you're talking about food, but it actually reflects your emotional state instead, except for that pattern did not continue. Nor is it particularly clear that she was in therapy at that moment. Again, a little muddled. I thought there was too much music too. Just like it was nice, but it just a little too much of it. Just a little over deployed.
It's an uneven.
Yeah.
It's an uneven.
Some very nice moments for sure. But I agree, uneven. Did it meet your expectations?
No, I was hoping for more.
Yeah. I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think, I thought it was I thought it was supposed to be great. I think it was merely good. And I think it got saved from mediocre into good by the strength of the performances. The performances lift it from mediocre into something. Because there are some stunning moments on camera that I saw there.
Well, listeners, coming up next, we are so looking forward to watching with you, we hope. Stanley Tucci and, oh God, who's the other director? Campbell Scott's 1996 masterpiece, Big Night, which is the next thing that we are going to listen to and consider.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, as always, for listening. It is always such a joy to have you guys here along with us. Upper Middlebrow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are the charming Italian interlopers. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by me, Chris Bagg. You can learn more about us at uppermiddlebrow.com.
And we are going to keep nagging you about the listener survey until we get enough entries. We did get one more, thanks Leah. But please fill out our listener survey or we're just going to keep talking about it. Which is one reason to do it. The other reason to do it is we'll enter you in a drawing to win a storied Bluetooth speaker. Perfect for listening to Upper Middlebrow or your other favorite podcasts. You can go to uppermiddlebrow.com for the link to the listener survey.
And as a reminder, Jesse and I are both writers and editors and can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. Check it out and get in touch if you want to talk about how we can help you with your project, big or small.
Good night, everybody. Clean your me's. Wipe down your mise en place.
I was like, clean your me's. I don't understand that sentence.
What does that mean? Is he referring to Mies van der? Or
what is
Mies some strange anatomical code word?
Clean your me's. Is this a state of Maine abbreviation? What is the state of Maine?
Are your me's particularly dirty?
We once asked one of the waiters to spell mise en place, and we were like, "Hey, spell mise en place for us. Like, just write it on the whiteboard over there in the corner." And he totally spelled it like a German, like Mizenplaus. And we were like,